There have been several times since Musk took Twitter over that people have said, oh, now we got to go to this other site, whether it was Threads or Mastodon. Now Blue Sky is hot. And it's hard to sustain that heat when there are so many choices. But it's always interesting for me, both as a user of social media, but as someone who covers this, to sort of check it out. And I must say, I'm seeing more pin action over on Blue Sky than I have in the past.
Hi, and welcome to the Silicon Insider podcast. Hey, Scott, how are you?
I'm good, Michael. How are you?
Well, I've been looking at a kind of a potpourri of stories. And given the time we're recording this and when it'll be heard, I think the most important story at the moment is Intel. The Intel's board of directors finally pushed out CEO Pat Gelsinger after he only burned $150 billion. I mean, did you see this coming?
Yeah, Intel has a big problem. And part of the problem is that you are probably the only podcast host in the universe that uses the word Intel and important in the same sentence. It is just no longer relevant. And it really did have a quick drop. You and I often talk about tech time. And, enough time has gone by in the AI world where not only AMD, which is embarrassing enough, but, NVIDIA have just left Intel in the rearview mirror. And that all happened really fast. And say what you will about Gelsinger, but it happened on his watch. And at some point, you just realize that Intel is a giant ship that's just hasn't moved in a long time and has missed several big time tech benchmarks in a row. And, there just has to be a shakeup when that happens.
Yeah, but it didn't miss big handouts from the federal government.
No, it got a giant handout. And what does it have to show for it? It lost even more money than the billions it was given by the CHIP Act, which is almost impressively bad for a big company.
Do you think the CHIP Act saved Gelsinger for a year or so?
That's a good question, and it might have because he was seen as one of the leaders, I think, and Intel has always been seen as one of the chip leaders. It just hasn't acted like it. And I think ultimately, even though the government may say, oh, well, Intel is still big, it employs a lot of people, it's planning to build these fabs and all that stuff, the shareholders know, the board of directors know, the Silicon Valley knows what's really going on, and that is not nearly enough to justify keeping this guy around.
Yeah, well, I agree. Absolutely. So he's going to be appointed to the board. Our former ASML Holding CEO Eric Maurice and Microchip Technology Inc. head Steve Sanghi. Know anything about them?
No, I don't. They're not all those, all that well known in Silicon Valley, but I think it's an interim thing. I think Intel's got to get a little more flash, excuse the pun, somebody that is well known that can recruit. I think Intel's biggest problem, and this is saying something, given all of its visible problems, is the invisible problem that if you're coming out of any program right now with a degree in computer science or engineering, think about how low Intel is on the list of places you want to work. And that says everything about how this is going to take a while to turn around.
Yeah, this is a game that you recruit superstars.
Right.
And what superstar? This is what happened, frankly, to newspapers. Who wanted to go work at a newspaper in the 21st century? You wanted to get into the internet, you want to get into TV, you want to get into something else, but not go back to, print. And I think Intel is going to have that problem unless they're willing to pay a superstar wages, maybe rate NVIDIA or AMD or one of those guys, Qualcomm. They're going to have a hard time. And even then, they've suffered a severe loss of intellectual capital. It's not just at the top. I'm sure it's down the rank and file that you just don't have premier people anymore like you used to. Andy Grove's hiring, you're going to go work for Andy Grove, but not for Pat Gelsinger.
Right. And not for Intel. This is kind of similar if you think about it. Remember when Yahoo was done and just irrelevant, and the stock was way down. Nobody wanted to work there. They hired Marissa Mayer. That was actually a great move, in my opinion. Bringing her from Google, which is sort of the NVIDIA of what you were talking about just a second ago.
Right.
She doubled the stock price. She made it kind of hip to work there, but it just wasn't enough to make Yahoo completely relevant. And now it's gone. I mean, it's still a search engine and email and stuff, but
Yeah.
it may
But
as well be gone as a
it's an
company. And
animal athlete. They know how to do it, but the legs just don't work anymore. If you got a company of 30,000 people, none of whom are really going to change the world anymore, no matter what you plan to do, you may not be able to get the company moving. That's what happened to Microsoft for a few years there till they turned it around.
right, and they had one of the great comebacks. Apple had a great comeback. Um, HP is trying.
Well, that's
Yahoo
good.
tried.
He was next. I was going to bring that up and say, oh, yeah, Mike, you're talking about these dead companies, anachronistic, old, you know, rusty steel companies. And yet, Hewlett Packard Enterprise being slow and steady with, the latest technology is doing great. Their numbers are way up because they focus on artificial intelligence servers, and they're bringing back the old HP quality, and they're doing it right. I mean, if any company was considered dead in this town, great company, it was HP. And yet here they are. It's like they're alive again, like they revived, Lazarus like.
Well, the spinoff is, yeah. Remember, they spun off into a couple different things,
Yeah.
and you're right. Getting into the AI world right now is your sort of ticket to staying alive, and that's what they're doing. And I mean, Dell is hot for the same reason. Look at Broadcom. Some of these companies that have been around for a long time, some of these software names are just exploding because they've got that AI pixie dust. And how long it lasts, who knows? But they're in the right place at the right time and they're executing. And that's everything you cannot say about Intel.
Yeah. Well, I bet you those old HP alumni who saw their stock go down to nothing, they're pretty happy right now.
If
Yeah.
they held, sure.
Yeah. All right. Next up, another big story. Um, Last Friday, a federal appeals court sided with the Justice Department on that to uphold that law that says TikTok's got to be sold by January 19th. Now, I think the next step is TikTok tries to take this to the United States Supreme Court, you know?
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing too, which really makes it an interesting battle. I mean, think about it, a social media company in front of the Supreme Court, talking about First Amendment issues and talking about privacy and talking about can a company with that much influence and Chinese ownership really have a place here in America? It's going to be fascinating.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because it's probably going to set a very large precedent. The Supreme Court takes it on, assuming they take it on. If they do take it on, this could have a profound effect on foreign ownership of companies in the United States.
Yeah,
So, see,
I wonder where this goes. And I think the case of TikTok and ByteDance in China is somewhat unique, at least for now, in the concerns that unite both sides of the aisle. Concerns
yeah,
about China and privacy.
yeah, you don't see a lot of bipartisanship these days, and boy, we're singing on this one.
Exactly. And you don't see a lot of concern about, nobody cared about owning a Nokia phone, for instance, right? It wasn't like people were freaked out about Finland. And there are lots of those examples. Oh, if you want a Volvo car, no one's worried about, the Swedes looking into your life. So I think this is very specifically about China, as it would be, let's say, about Russia.
Yeah,
And that's what makes this all the more interesting. TikTok had said the January 19th deadline was unconstitutional because of First Amendment rights, saying it was violating the rights of the 170 million users that were on TikTok. And the court said that doesn't apply to TikTok users because it doesn't apply to TikTok because they're Chinese owned. It's really interesting, and it'll be fascinating to follow where this goes from here.
yeah. I mean, invoking the First Amendment is an interesting one because you can sort of see a case that can be made that way, but at the same time, the feds are worried. as all of us should be, that your Volvo doesn't send messages back to Sweden about what you're doing today. And your Nokia phone has a camera on it, but it's not sending images back to wherever the hell, Finland, all about you. I mean, this is not the concern. I mean, everyone's concern is rotting kids' brains and all of that, but the real concern is privacy.
Right. And I think China is different in the way we see it than Finland or Sweden. That's why I brought up those countries. We're not
Yeah.
freaked out about the idea that Nokia is giving your private data to Finland. We're just not thinking about that. But we are thinking about what ByteDance and TikTok might be doing with our data when it comes to the Chinese government. And that's why this case, I think, has so much attention. And like you said, it's uniting both sides of the aisle of an otherwise very divided country.
Well, I'm curious what they'll do. I have a feeling they're not going to win this one. So, do they move out of the United States? Do they spin off a subsidiary that has no connection with China
Well,
except financial?
that's what the government wants ByteDance to do is spin off, I imagine, for billions of dollars, an American version of TikTok that keeps all the data here in this country. I don't know that ByteDance wants to do that. There's so much money on the line here, but it almost makes it worth it because there's so much money on the line here.
Yeah.
Spin it off.
170 million subscribers. I mean, why
Right.
wouldn't you want to cash that in?
I mean, you look at this and you think it's the next trillion-dollar company, and there's just so much money to be unlocked here eventually that you'd think they'd come to a deal. But instead, like you said at the top, it looks more like this will be dragged through the court and all the way to the Supreme Court. And then, I don't know what they say. It would be hard, I agree with you, to imagine TikTok winning without a split off. But who knows? So, Donald Trump, for example, recently was against TikTok. He and Joe Biden agreed. Then one of the TikTok shareholders had some influence, a lot of money. All of a sudden, Trump was saying, well, we shouldn't ban TikTok. So this thing could change depending on, where the money flows for the next 4 years. But I think legally,
Yeah.
it looks like TikTok is in for quite a challenge. But who knows?
So is there a way to find a happy medium where China has no information access to TikTok? It's a wholly owned subsidiary. And so, they send the freighters full of cars here, and then we send back freighters full of cash back to China. But
I mean, yeah,
we
I think
keep
the
the
cash is
privacy.
I think the cash is the key here. You're right. I mean, at some point, if they could find a spin-off and say sell this to, I don't know, let's just say for, a name, let's say they sell it to Salesforce.
Yeah.
Salesforce pays a few $1 billion and a bunch of stock. And ByteDance still has equity in TikTok, but everything that TikTok America does stays in America in terms of the data and all that. And
I don't want to
then you go
use the
from there.
phrase Chinese wall, but that would be literally what it would be.
Right. I guess that would be right. And again, I don't know if TikTok, excuse me, if ByteDance or the Chinese government would be willing to do that. But if they don't, it just seems like a whole lot of money would be lost potentially.
Yeah. Okay. By the way, the fact that hope they're willing to lose that kind of money suggests the other value of TikTok to the Chinese government. I mean, is it that important to them? Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
maybe so.
Uh, Bitcoin. We have been talking about we've been talking about cyber currency for years now, always saying, be careful. It's frothy, it's dangerous, it's unpredictable. And boom, Bitcoin tops $100,000 this week. And you ought to hear the gnashing of teeth I'm hearing out there. All the people that bought Bitcoin, but they lost their password.
That
Yeah.
would be a tragedy. Look,
They
the
wrote it
one
on
thing
a
I can
piece of
say,
paper and put it in their wallet so they wouldn't lose it. Then then the wallet went through the wash and washed away all the ink. Yeah.
I mean, the one thing, Mike, really, you and I have been talking about this since the early days. And And that says something. I think a lot of people have had a lot of interest in this. It certainly has been extremely volatile. I mean, we saw it go from 10,000 to 60,000, back to 17,000, back up again. It's nearly doubled in 4 months. That's saying something. It's
Yeah.
gone up 30% since the election alone, which for a $100,000 coin currency is also saying something. This thing is just defying gravity. It is really, really making Bitcoin holders and would-be holders optimistic about the next 4 years at least.
Right.
And
So
you
this is the
wonder.
so is this the Trump effect?
I think it is. I think it's the
I mean,
Trump effect.
he shows up at that cyber conference, and all of a sudden, after that, the market starts taking off. Like, not just that he's going to make a better environment for it, but it sounds like people are starting to think it's going to become a real currency, a recognized.
Potentially so. When he talked about his love all of a sudden for cryptocurrency and for Bitcoin, it became almost a tracking equity for Trump's chances to win the presidency. People were
Yeah.
saying that about, DJT, the Donald J. Trump media, Trump media, that stock. But that sort of faded a bit. But Bitcoin really did soar, even the night that it seemed, on election night itself, when it seemed clear that Trump was going to win. Bitcoin soared. It soared since then. Naming people like David Sachs as a crypto czar,
Right.
it just gives people even more hope because David Sachs is a humongous crypto fan. And so people are thinking this has all somehow made this coin more valuable. And they have bet on that to the tune of, what are we at? $100,000, nine figures, nine figures?
Yeah.
Well, six figures, $100,000.
Yeah, six figures.
Yeah.
But it
I'm not good
raised
with math.
it, when you gamble big, you can lose big. And if Trump changes his mind or Congress comes up with legislation trying to control all the crypto world, this could all come crashing down in a big way.
I mean, you just have to know that this is very volatile. The day it hit 100,000, over the next 24 hours, it went up to about 104,000. And
Yeah.
then within hours, it was at 92,000, a $12,000 a coin drop. Then it was back up to 100,000. This thing moves by the thousands, multiple thousands of dollars within hours. And so it's just not for the faint of heart. Yet you have to admit, and I have to admit, as someone who's been telling young people from the newsroom to just out on the street to be cautious about this because it's really risky, it has done nothing over the long term, but gone up. I have to admit that so far.
Do you feel like an old man yelling at clouds right now? You
Yes, I am.
kids,
I'm the old man.
kids, listen to me. I have the wisdom of the ages.
Right. I'm the boring guy saying, put money in your 401k. Don't worry about this crypto stuff. And all right, I've been proven wrong. But it is something that, you can buy it and hold it and just keep your fingers crossed. But if you watch it daily, it is hard stopping with the ups and
Oh, I
downs.
was going to say, yeah, you you've been wrong yet. I mean, hey, you've been proven wrong until now, but I still am wary of that world. It's just too volatile. It's too crazy. There's too many con men and schemers and all that there. But I'll tell you who's the happiest people on earth right now. People in the government of El Salvador.
Ah, that's good. I thought you were going to say former FTX crypto holders that thought they had nothing and now have
Yeah,
actually made money on all that whole thing.
I think El Salvador made several $billion recently.
If they stuck with it, yeah, I guess the happiest people could be those guys, the FTX holders, the Winklevoss twins,
Yeah,
certainly Michael Saylor and anyone who holds MicroStrategy or Coinbase stock. I mean, these have turned into Bitcoin tracking stocks, even while they're, entirely whole companies. It's just been amazing the effect that this has had on the economy and this train that people do not want to miss. And I think that's a large part of what's going on.
this is that thing where, oh, Nvidia stock's climbing. We got to get some.
Right.
Yeah, by hook or crook. Well, let's see what happens. You know, geez. It's pretty crazy. But when you got the president of the president-elect of the United States saying, "Congratulations, Bitcoiners, $100,000. You're welcome."
Right.
Yeah, okay.
That you're welcome did a lot of work.
So I mean, that's like having the president-elect of the United States doing infomercials. I mean, isn't he like moving the market? Isn't that illegal? We'll see.
Yeah,
It's a new
we
world.
don't know because
It's a new world, cyber.
past results are no longer, guarantees of future performance.
That's true. Not coincidentally, President-elect Trump on last Thursday, said he was appointing PayPal's chief operating officer, David Sachs, as the White House, as you mentioned, AI and crypto czar. Um, is the entire government going to be PayPal, children of PayPal in the future? I mean, Elon, I mean, on both sides of the thing. I mean, we have venture capitalists trying to buy the election out of PayPal. We have the richest man in America hanging out with the president of the United States from PayPal, and now we have the head of AI from PayPal.
Yeah, don't
This
forget Peter Thiel behind the scenes. Sure.
and Peter Thiel behind the scenes. This may be the most powerful family tree. I remember the old charts of Silicon Valley family tree, and you have, Fairchild and National and blah, blah, blah. Look at PayPal. It's just amazing. And you have people kind of affiliated with it, like Jeff Skull, who from eBay, who went down and did participant films in Hollywood. This is an amazing outfit.
Yeah, and that's a microcosm of a larger thing. I think in past administrations, you've seen bankers take over. Now it's sort of the rise of the venture capital class and tech executives. Tech is making a huge move here, led by Elon Musk, but there are other VCs involved. And they wrote checks. I'm waiting to see where Mark Andreessen falls in all of this. They wrote checks, they tweeted about it. Jason Calacanis recently just tweeted, "Hey, how about, giving me a job?" I mean, the thirst is real here. These are people who donated a lot of money and are being rewarded as loyalists by Donald Trump.
By the way, did Sachs go to school with Elon? I mean, they were both born in South Africa. Sachs is 52.
Sachs
And
went to Stanford.
okay, he was born in South Africa.
Right, but he went to Stanford.
Stanford, yeah. And yeah, the PayPal mafia. He also said that he's going to be on the president's uh, technology council as well. So it's very interesting. Oh, and Mark Andreessen, he's interesting because, boy, his politics have shifted in the last couple of years. And he was on Joe Rogan the other day, which, I guess that's the new, you've made it all the way. You're a titan of American life if you get on Joe Rogan. So we're seeing a lot of those guys, tech oriented, showing up there. I mean, this seems to be a changing of the guard. Just when Silicon Valley was getting into disrepute from all the scandals and trying to buy elections and all that, all of a sudden, it's like they're back and bigger and bolder than ever and holding government positions.
Right. Silicon Valley for a long time wanted to very specifically stay out of politics.
Oh,
And
yeah.
that has flipped. And now it very specifically wants to pull the strings of politics. And that's greased by money. And so it just makes sense that these men, largely men who have all this money, now want influence in government. And so they're spending money to get it. The rumor is that Musk spent nearly $250 million on the Trump campaign. He's made much more back on that just in the gain of Tesla stock, not to mention cryptocurrencies. So that seems to be a very good investment. And
Well,
that's what we're
obviously,
seeing.
we got Zuckerberg going down to Mar-a-Lago and bending a knee, you know.
Right.
Yeah. So it'll be. I oftentimes feel like these guys want a position in Hollywood because on their bucket list, you know, company founder, CEO, chairman of the board, politics. that for them, the arc they have when they lay in bed at night of their career always ends up in Washington. It's either that or they're trying to finally get a return on investment of those armies of lobbyists that they've placed in Washington, D.C. to get what they want. It's like, to hell with those guys. I'll get it myself. I'll make it happen.
You're seeing it in real time right now in government. If you want to see it in Hollywood, rent a very good movie called Thank You for Smoking, based on a good
Yes.
book. The movie, when you see the production, the producer credits will go back to one company, and once again, that company is PayPal.
Yeah, there we go.
Yep.
Okay. Um, Stocks have been interesting this week. They dipped, I believe it was on Thursday, because the job report was coming in, but it was doing really well, and then it fell 250 points. I guess that's not a lot anymore with 45,000 on the Dow. What were the job reports today?
Um, Job reports back on Friday were actually good. Jobs
Yeah.
added, wage growth slightly higher, and once again, that shows that the Fed may cut a little more, but also with a lot of people working and making a little more money, it could be inflationary. We're still not completely done with that, but again, all signs of a strong economy. That people are still at work and even making a tick higher in wages. So it wasn't one of those that made people freak out in either direction. But I think it's the sign of an ongoing strong economy.
Is unemployment still climbing?
Yeah, it's up to about 4.2, I believe. So a
Okay.
slight tick higher in that as well.
Okay, that's a little worrisome. Um, this is a weird one, but the shooting of the United Healthcare CEO in Manhattan seems to have already had effect on insurance companies. Several of them are changing their rules and all that. What effect do you think it's going to have on the valley? I mean, we we can go back to the days when David Packard could be seen at Orchard Supply buying, screws for tree limbs in his orchard and cans of paint by himself. Nowadays, these guys are so wealthy and they're so public that a lot of them, most of them have bodyguards. You think this is going to amp that up even more? I mean, to have
Yes.
this guy made the mistake of walking across the street. I mean, he literally was probably walking 200 feet and he gets shot and assassinated. This has got to put a chill down the back of every senior executive in the valley since they're so public and they're so in many ways so controversial.
Right. I just think security overall is going to be a priority. And I don't know that this affects the Valley more than anywhere else, but I just think if you're an executive right now, you're really double and triple checking your security. And that just makes sense in the wake of something like this.
Okay. Do you have anything anecdotal yet? I guess they
No,
wouldn't tell you if they were hiring extra bodyguards.
right. So nothing anecdotal in tech. But you've seen other healthcare companies take their executive profiles off of the web page, that sort of thing,
Yeah.
just to take their faces and identities off in the wake of this. And I wouldn't be surprised if you see more of that across any industry right now, just as security becomes so important.
Well, I mean, that's kind of bad news. I mean,
Well,
that
sure.
one of the effects might be to make companies less transparent.
I mean, a bit, but you can be more security conscious and um, still be transparent. I mean, I wouldn't call transparency, putting out the address or the whereabouts of your executive. I don't think people need to know that unless it's a shareholder meeting, obviously,
Yeah.
and expect ramped up security. I think at those in the future.
Yeah. Years ago, the San Francisco Chronicle got in a lot of trouble because they printed a map that showed the location of the homes of everybody in Silicon Valley, all the major players.
Yeah,
And
I've never
it was
understood.
basically a kidnapper's guide to Silicon Valley.
I've never understood the point of that, other than to say, hey, look, rich people live among us. But that's a security breach. There's no need for that.
Yeah. Okay. And then we have a court in Texas blocked the Corporate Transparency Act, uh, which is seen as a win for federalism that the federal government should not be able to, you know, ask certain questions as part of what it presents as an anti-laundering effort to try to get detailed information on your financial transactions and all of that, who you're selling to. And it looks like the court reasoned that the Federal Crimes Enforcement Network had overstepped its bounds. Is this a good thing?
I don't know. I didn't see this. I tend to just come down on privacy, for people anyway.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I
you
don't.
tend to be a privacy guy.
Yeah,
And so,
because it's so easy to lose our privacy in any of these situations. So
yeah,
that's
and I,
where
I don't like the idea of a giant the government database in Washington keeping track of everything I buy, what kind of bills I use, if I use cash, that kind of stuff. I mean, small business was just getting get buried in this stuff. So I think it's a victory for small business, which when you think about it, it's a victory here in town too for all the new startups and retailers and all that. So I'm cheering that on. And we got to, I want to bring it up again. HP Enterprise is doing well. And another company that we thought basically did, Supermicro, had stock growth last week. It's like they've got it back together and they're coming back, I think. But is this like the tide of artificial intelligence literally lifts all boats now, except for Intel?
no, this is still its own story. Their tide was lifted very much, then it all crumbled because of accounting problems. They now have an accountant. They still have to provide some results, but there's some stock buying because at least it looks like they're likely to stay on the Nasdaq and not go completely under. But this is
And
still
very
money that has to
rarely
go
do
out.
you see a guy with a green eye shade be a major corporate hero. Some guy
Well,
back there with an adding machine making it all work.
yeah, I don't know if this becomes a corporate hero, but really they just need to get their accounting in order. They may have just flown too close to the sun, and we'll see. They haven't put out the numbers to really calm everybody yet, but they could make a strong comeback. Remember, they were at $120 a share, fell to about 17 very quickly, and now are at, in the 40s. That's
Yeah.
still about a third of where they were
They
before.
were kind
But
of the reverse of Bitcoin.
yeah, I mean, you can rise fast, but you can also fall fast in this business.
Yeah. Well, I wish them well. I wish them legality. and we'll keep an eye on Bitcoin. We'll see what happens this week. I think just literally, if President Trump coughs or Elon just makes some remark on the side, Bitcoin could lose a lot of that money it just gained. And we'll have another topic for next week. So, all right, that's it for now, folks. You can find us on Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. You can see Scott on Facebook and X, and of course, almost every weeknight on NBC Bay Area, and hear me regularly on the BBC World Radio show Business Matters. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week. Bye bye.